Welcome, guys. Welcome to what is supposed to be lesson 8. Let me fix that right quick. Got 7 up there. There we go. Supposed to be lesson 8. Sorry about that. We're going to be looking at the iOS of routers and switches, guys. Routers and switches. I want to mix it up with some fun. So we're going to be a little bit different. We got the green screen behind us today, so a little bit better than what we have had. So we're going to start getting towards looking at this a little bit more. Now, I threw this in a little bit earlier than I normally probably would, but I don't want it to get too boring if you're watching the videos from 1 all the way through, getting ready to take your CCENT certification by Cisco, and this would be great prep for it. So, without further ado, let's lower this, and I'm going to start up a few things on the computer while you guys are doing that, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to be doing. So first, we're going to be looking at a router in GNS3, and then we'll be looking at my physical home lab, which is a 2960 layer 2 switch. Green cup, as you can see. Because it's black, it ain't really black. So, without further ado, I'm slowly getting this stuff up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn on another webcam here. This one don't stretch as far. I was trying to get a view of it, and I've not been able to find a spot before doing this video of where to get a view for this camera to be basically working really well. So, alright, let's turn it on. As you can see, we got this rack right here. It's kind of got my second monitor on there. But as you can see, I got a network rack. Now, this is my home lab station, and it is, I'm going to show you, it's pretty impressive compared to most. But for the CCENT, you don't need this kind of setup. So, all right, if we take a look, as you can see, it sits beside my desk. My desk is right here. We've got 1841s. As you can see, I've got stuff actually plugged into those a little bit. I've been messing with them. We've got some IP phones right there on top. I've actually got more than that. We've got two layer 2 switches, and that's the ones we're going to be looking at. As you can see, one of them's actually lit up. That's the one we'll be in a minute or later on. All these gray ones are what they call what is it, 3750, 39, I can't remember, 3750 I think is the layer 2 switch. I have to go back and look. I get them mixed up, man. I've been looking at so many models. And then down here is actually HP switches. And then I've got a ton of 1841s, and there's a 2811 actually in this box that I have not racked yet. I'm waiting, I got the rack years. I've just always been lazy and not done it. And it's about brand spanking new, to be honest. And you can see we got a lot of cables. We even got 2 more switches down below the ground. So these are HP switches. We won't be doing none of these. I might show you guys one video with a HP switch to show you maybe that if you learn one, it kind of carries over a little bit into some switches. But them bad boys right there, that's the one we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to try to get you a decent angle, if I can, to that setup right there. That way when you guys see it, you'll see me plug it up. But for now, we're going to turn that off. And the reason I've got that there is to show you guys. Alright, so let's move on over. Alright, so we got GNS3 right here started up, guys. And you can find GNS3. It's completely free. But the iOS images, the Cisco iOS images, you have to get yourself. I cannot give those out or anything like that. It's something that you have to require yourself. I know the Cisco VIRL provides images, but I think them are classes. And they provide a basic set of images. But the reason we're doing a physical switch is there's a really powerful switch image that they give you. But I don't really want to show you guys that. So, now here's the thing about GNS3. If you're not familiar, it's just like the router itself. We're going to be pulling the 3725 router here. There we go. And we're going to get that out of the way. And let's see, what do I want to put? I'm going to put some more routers just so it don't look as bad. Not those. Put some more 3725s. But we're only going to be looking at one of these. And the reason I got these is we're going to actually connect them. So we browse routers. Once we have the images, you can see the ones that are lit up, the ones that aren't. Going to minus that down. We got switches here, and then we got end devices here, which is luckily with GNS3 you do get the virtual PC. It's really cool. It acts as a PC. It's awesome. And I run mine on a virtual machine, and you can do the same. There's some free ones out there that run it. But let's go ahead and connect it, or at least you can get trial versions of some that'll last a while. So I'm just going to connect these. I haven't started anything technically right now. I'm just connecting. I'm just going to connect them into a big, nice little triangle here. No big deal. We're only going to be looking at one. I'm just trying to fulfill all the there. So first we're going to be looking at, like I said, the router. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can get into there first. I cannot. Alright, everything looks good. As you can see, we got a few things that we can do here. I can add extra serial slots if I want to, and etc. So let's start them up, and I'm going to remote in into the console. This is just like being plugged into the console port, and they're going to load the images. Now, what you need to understand about GNS3 versus the actual router is that the default settings are not exactly what Cisco sets them as. And we'll talk about those, and I'll remind you throughout the course, because sometimes questions will come, what is the default setting of etc. So I want you guys to know that. So this router, basically this is your iOS image that is opening up, decompressing, because it's compressed into your flash. And I will show you guys that in a minute. But this is, if I wish to plug into a router, a 3725, the same thing. I'm going to pretty much, this is about as identical as it gets. So it's going to take it a minute to boot up. Same way, if you turn a router on, it's going to boot up the same way. A switch, I will reload one, and you will see the same thing. The command reload will do it. So we're not going to do anything fancy. All we're looking at, guys, is the basic form of iOS. I want you to get familiar. It looks almost like a command line setup. So get used to this screen. There is what they call GUI setups, but for the CCNA, CCENT, you ain't doing nothing in the GUI at all of any kind of switch. I will show an example probably later in another video, maybe the next video about GUI interfaces, talk about them, but it's not required for the CCENT. It can actually be a video that is skipped for the CCENT. Usually at the start of any video, I'm going to tell you if it's part of the CCENT or not, or if it's something I'm just showing you to get better familiar. So, alright, so once we get to this here, as you can see, we got a R. What I want you to know is that this is considered privilege mode already, when in reality, in a switch you will not be. I was going to see if it had bumped me down, but it will not. In reality, you would have to hit the enable, which takes you to the pound. So originally, it's going to look like an R1 and then a less than sign, or no, greater than, I'm sorry, greater than sign, and that is what they call, I call it view mode, but basically it's your, shoot, I can't even think of the term. But the next one from there, I guess you can call it the user mode. And then the next one from there is exact user mode. And I'll look that up and make sure that I got the terms right here at the end and let you know. But one you got to really know is the privilege exact mode. Privilege mode is your next one, which is where we're at right now with the pound. If it's the greater than sign, that's basically, I call it like a view only mode. You can only view stuff. You technically cannot really configure much. You can do show commands and so on from there. You can view, but like I said, you can't really do changes. And then you got privilege mode, which allows you to see more and access other areas. Privilege mode is basically the highest area for the password. You cannot put a password on what we call the configure terminal, even though that's where 99% of your, or we'll say 95% of your configurant is going to be in, obviously configure. But alright, so we're in, you're always going to need the enable command. And you can always see, from here we're going to do a show. And we're just going to look, and you can always do a question mark if you do not know. As you can see, it displays, and there is a lot of commands in a router. For the CCNA, you might not have to know all of these, but it doesn't hurt to get familiar, and you might not memorize how to get to each path, so you're going to use the question mark. I use it a ton, and even a lot of network engineers use it a ton. Even if they know the command, they get used to using that. So always remember, if you're not sure about a command, you can hit that. You can hit spacebar or I can hit enter. Enter's a line at a time. But a spacebar does supposed to do close to a whole page. In this case, it really isn't. And look at the amount of commands. There's a lot, right? And that's just a show command. So before the show command, if I do a question mark, we can see all the commands that slide up. And the thing is alright, that doesn't look like much if you're not familiar with routers. I mean, well, it's still a good bit. But let's say I see one of these. Let's say I see, I'm just trying to pick one that I know is going to have a lot. Let's say I see this right here. I see tunnel. Let's see what tunnel has. So I do tunnel, question mark, and then a word or remote. So that's only one. Let's see, web VPN, question mark. I get two. I get logging, and then I get enable. So let's do another one. How about a system stat, or SY stat? I do a question mark. I get all or carriage return. Let's do one that I know is going to have a lot. I know the show command had a ton. Let's see. Let's do CCM manager. So CCM manager, question mark. CCM manager. Did I do that wrong? Is it two M's? Nope, one M. It might be because I don't have it enabled on, or this one doesn't have call manager on it. Oh, CCM dash manager, oops. And then question mark, we get switch over to backup. So nothing much there, but if I do if I'll verify, you see I get a few on the verify, and so on from there. So if I do show, which we know show has a lot, let's do show. And I know another one actually, we'll do copy. Oh, that ain't gonna do it. Alright, so show, question mark. Alright, let's say I get down here and I see one that I want. Let's say I see show and I see class map. So I do show class map, question mark. Look, I get the extra type of class. We'll do type. And then look, I get some more. I get access control, control inspect, logging, port filter, queue threshold, and then I get stack. So you can see I can go through each option until basically once you see a CR, you can hit enter, or you can get more detailed usually, or specific more in a command. So let's back this on up. So what I want to do is show run. So what does show run mean? I'll show you what it's short for. So we got show run. It's going to wait a minute to display because it's processing. This is going to be one of your first kind of thing to really look at a configuration and troubleshoot. So you'll be familiar with it. Show run shows me the configuration of the router almost completely. For example, we know we got an interface. We have a fast Ethernet port on 00. It's got no IP address, shut down, so it's not on, and so on from there. Hit enter, it does one line at a time. Hit spacebar, it does several lines at a time. I guess you could say, I would say a full page, but in this case several lines at a time. And then I do show IP interfaces. That's a command. We got show. Alright, I'll tell you what, to show run, I said it was short for something. There it is. If I hit tab, it will complete the command. So show run is short for show running dash config. Show start. This is start up config. So if I do show start, let's say I take that out. If I do config, and I'm going to show you guys. Alright, I do a config. Kind of memorize some of this. Alright, if we look, startup config using 402 out of 473, you can kind of look and just get an eye. See, there's not much in there. Now let me do show startup, or show start. And you see I get the exact same. Here it's just going to have no logging in. There we go. Exact same command there from the show start. as that would be show startup config. And the same for run. Let's say show running config. Remember, it had a lot of lines. We're going to see it. It took it a minute to get going. So we're going to do that. And there we go. And we're going to talk more about this as we get more specifically towards routers. So we'll put on a little bit of a demonstration. At this point, you will have to know this eventually, but we're going to talk more in detail. So this is to help jog your memory or jog your mind before you get to that point and be like, oh yeah, I've seen that. So at the start, we'll always do enable. Remember, EN is short for it. Configuration, or configure, sorry, T. So configure terminal. You'll see most people type that configure terminal. Like I said, you can do them short, even 2 or more. Config T like this. And now you can see we got a new display. We got R1 in parentheses config with a pound sign. I'm going to end. That'll put me back to 1. So we're in privilege mode. So what if I do configure terminal and hit enter? You can see I'm at the same thing. So you can't have more than one word short. Now you can have something that might be configure. Let's see if we got a. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. Let's say configure. Is there any other ones? So let's say I'm looking to see if we got one with 2 same letters. We don't in this case. So anything I put in, it's going to pretty much create it in this case. So let's do show. I'm trying to see. All right, let's say I do show access. There's a good one. So you can always hit Control-C to not have to go through completely. So show access. Now watch what happens. It's going to give me the ambiguous command, show access. Now when you get ambiguous command, it means it's not completed or it cannot determine what it's for. So if I look here, access, let's say I do -L, which separates it from the -E, all of a sudden, it ain't showing nothing because we don't have no access list. But all of a sudden, it works. Same with access E, but there's nothing there. L, nothing there, because nothing's been configured at all on the access list. So back to configure terminal. This is where most of your configuration will be at when you're actually configuring the router. Not the view settings or anything like that, but mostly to configure the router. As you can see, there is awful lot. You will be learning several of these commands throughout the CCENT, but it will not be required to know them all, basically, as we'll only talk about the ones referenced in the CCENT from here. But there is several commands that go past and beyond the CCENT and even the CCNA itself, but you will be learning the most basic to configure, and the other ones are different. I mean, they come into play, don't get me wrong, but they're a little bit different. But I'd say you're going to learn several of these commands that you see. For example, spanning tree. You'll know what stacks are. Trying to look at some other one. TAC server. Tag switching. You'll know TFTP server. You will know trunk for sure. That's a big one. Translate. Let's see. VLAN for sure. Voice, which probably won't hit too much. VTP you will learn a lot about, especially in the ICND2. But you will have to know how it works in the ICND1 also, or at least the basics of it. And you got router, IP, network. I mean, a lot of this stuff you're going to learn about, and so on from there. So, now by default, remember we can do show. We got the show command. I'm going to back up and do show IP question mark, and we're looking for interface there. We see interface. And I'm going to do brief. That should be up there hopefully somewhere. There it is, down there at the bottom, even though it ain't in alphabetical order. And what I want you to see is that we do know in this command line, or in this topology, and all routers are on, I can show you. See, we got router 3, and we got router 2. So, these are saying that they're down, so they're actually not communicating at all. the routers at all. So what I want you to understand, and this is beyond, we're going to talk about it more in another lesson. This is mostly just to see, and I'm letting you get familiar kind of how the iOS looks. But I will show you right quick that by default on routers, Cisco shuts the ports down. They're on shutdown. And shutdown means off. So shutdown means off. No shutdown means on. Switches are the opposite. Switches have ports on. So if you want port security or you don't want certain ports to work, you'll go through the port interface and you will shut them down. So remember that. Routers are shut down by default. Each Ethernet port or the Ethernet port on the router is shut down. Switches, they're on by default, and you have to shut them down. And the reason routers are shut down by default is that they are used for WAN devices, so it's safer for them to have it automatically shut down. Switches are used in LAN environments, so it's not. I mean, it's still considered a security risk, but it's safer because of the fact it's in your environment of the LAN. I don't know if that's the exact purpose why they do it. I've never researched it, but if I had to assume, that is why, because you do not want the port. You might not want the port open the time you're plugging everything up and you're turning on your router, which a great network, or usually most of your network engineers are not going to be plugging stuff in. They're going to turn the router on first. They're going to look at it and decide, probably write down how they're going to configure it if they haven't already, or have an idea of how they want to set it up, and really look at the default run and what's set up, and then set it up as needed, and then test it on the inside, and then they might even unplug the inside network and test it on the outside before they combine them together to make sure everything works, and then combine it. If they're comfortable, and experienced, you'll probably combine both, because you're going to already be behind a firewall of some sort, possibly. Alright, so enough of that. So enable configure terminal. See, if I just put config, it has come up with terminal. So what I want to do is interface fast Ethernet 00, and I'm going to no shutdown. Alright, so remember I said no shutdown is and we're going to see that. Look at how many commands. There's so many commands. That's where most people get overwhelmed. So you really got to watch. Like, if you never know anything about networking and you get into one of these, learning how to get them to communicate is not easy by yourself. You'll have to have some kind of guide. So no shutdown on this interface, because by default they're shut down. So I do no shutdown. As you can see, the link comes up. The link is up. So no shutdown turns it on, but by default it is usually down. So if I do a show interface brief again, or oops, rather show or do show IP interface brief. There. Now what I'm going to teach is the do command can be used from a different mode than that the commands actually exist at, as long as you're a mode above it. But most of the time, in most videos, especially in the future, you're going to see me just go down a mode, do it, because really that's not much of it. I've never seen a question like that. But you can reference that do. For example, if I don't do on that, show IP interface brief, it's not going to show it. But if I go down to privilege mode, because I'm at a configure terminal mode, I actually configure interface mode, I do show IP interface brief, it works. So always remember, different modes that you're in the router allows different access. So if something doesn't work, a lot of times it can be that you're in the incorrect mode. Goes configure T for configure terminal, interface fast Ethernet 00, and we'll shut that down. As you can see here, look, we're up. We're actually up and up, so it's actually communicating. But by default, it is under the shutdown command, and you're going to see this line come down. We're going to get some messages. So we get the administratively down. So administratively down means that we are making it down, and it comes by default administratively down on Cisco routers. And it says change state to down. but we do no shutdown, or no shutdown. It's going to come up. We're going to end. We're going to go back to config terminal, interface on the other one, fast Ethernet 01, and we're going to do no shutdown, all one word, and that line should come up also. And I'm just going to go through this right quick, and I'm going to show you that these will communicate. I'm not sure. Let's get this up so I can. Oh, nope, that is not what I wanted actually. Wrong one. This. It's a fast Ethernet 0. Enable config T interface fast Ethernet 00. No shut. So that's going to bring this port up because I want to see them communicating on router 1 right quick before we move to the switch. Enable config T interface fast Ethernet. This one's on 00 also, no shut. And all of these are going to come up. And interface fast Ethernet. Did we do 0? We did do 00, right? Yeah, we did. Alright, show IP interface brief. And now remember, it doesn't hurt if you want to go ahead and write these commands down. It does not hurt. They're going to be great troubleshooting, but we're going to talk more in them in details in the specific router and then a specific switch lesson. Right now, we're just showing you guys the iOS, how this works, so you can kind of get an idea of what this looks like. Physically, this is our network. They were not talking to each other at first. They didn't even see each other at first. But if I do a show CDP neighbors, I'm going to see, if we look here, I can see router 2, which is router 2 over here. Remember, we're in this router right here, so we're technically in router 1. But in router 1, we can see router 2 and the interface that we see it off of, which is fast Ethernet 00. The interface that router 2 is using is fast Ethernet 00 to get to us on its router. Then we also see router 3, and we're seeing it from our fast Ethernet 01. Notice local interface, the router wins router 1, so that means the local interface, which is the router itself. The port ID is the interface of the neighbor that it's getting to us, which is fast Ethernet 00. Now we can see the capabilities here, RSI, and if you look here, I won't go over too much of this because a lot of this sits up here, and it'll be the same in anything else. So R for router, S for switch. Now the reason that this is a switch, it does have the switch capabilities with the cards, and then I for IGMP. So this is a router. So the main commands that I really want you to learn is, I'm trying to see, can I clear? I want to clear screen. Does it got a screen in there? I don't see screen. Alright. Okay, I don't know. Alright, so we're going to hit enter a few times. We're just going to clear this for a second. Alright, so the first command you really want to know is show run. And if you got your own lab or GNS3 set up, get familiar with the show run command. Go in and out of your modes. Remember, you got several modes. You'll have to do enable. A lot of them is going to look like this. Now pay attention. You see I'm over here. A lot of it's going to look like that. You have to type enable or EN to get to the next mode. Once you get to the next mode, it'll look something like this, which is the mode that we're currently in. This is called privilege mode, privileged exec mode. And then you can type in config T or something to that extent. And once you go to config T, it's going to be something to... actually, I did it all wrong. It'll look like this. These are the three modes you're going to have to really know for the CCENT. This is considered the configure terminal mode. So you got configure terminal and then privilege exec mode. I was trying to, which is like this in this case. Now this can be named anything. Just I want you to understand what comes after the name of this device. And then the normal view, or I call user mode. I'll look it up and verify the exact name because we'll have to know it. I know it when I see it, but I don't actually usually memorize that one. So that is it. Now in GNS3, here's where I was talking to you guys that GNS3 is a little bit different. So by default in GNS3, guess what I'm in? I'm in privilege exec mode. Now, if I, let's see here. I might can get rid of that though. So I enable a secret. And it's, will it let me? Nope. Doesn't look like it will. So I was going to look, enable secret. Complete commands. So, okay. So it's going to take me into user. It probably would if I relog, but do know that by default, you will be in the view, not in a privilege exec. If I plug in, and we'll see that in the switch, I will not be in a privilege exec mode. So anyway, so if we wish to be in a router and we want to, first things you might want to look at on the first router you ever see, or you first log into one, is maybe a few things. One is the show version. Now what this is going to do is going to show me the iOS that I'm using. So we know it's a 3700, which we know it's a 3725, as you can tell here. Advanced Enterprise or iOS. Now this is a higher end iOS. Now there is different iOSs, as we will talk about them as we get into the course. This is the version. So 12.4, 15, and we'll break this down also in the video into the routers and talking more about switches and routers. Probably introduced into the routers. Uptime, and I can keep going. You see a TFTP. If it's looking for one, here it is, Cisco 3725. We can see the processor. We can see a lot of different stuff. 2 fast Ethernet interfaces. We can, and then we're done from here, and we can see the register, and we'll learn more about the register to also what them values mean. And then after that, you will probably be doing the show run. We always want to look at the show run. If you just booted up the router, the show run should match your show startup. But if I make a change, for example, we have these on no shut, these 2 interfaces, right? They're on no shut, and as you can see, they actually are not showing it, but by default, if I do show start, it should show them, I think, is shut down, or will it? No, it's actually not even going to show me there. So show start and show run when you first boot up a router should be pretty close to identical. Show run is going to show a little bit more, but the show startup is going to be the configurations that it's actually got saved. Alright, so moving on. That's a router. This is GNS3. See, I can look at all of these here. I can do show run over here. And this is all 3725 router images on this router. Alright, that's enough with routers. That's the router iOS, kind of how it looks. So you get a little bit of a general idea. If we look, see, shut down. My other router, this one is, there's a good example. All right, we turned this one off so it communicate with one. See, it does not have the no shutdown. Has no IP address. If I put in an IP address, that'll disappear, and it'll tell me the IP address. But this one shows shutdown, and this one doesn't. So sometimes if you see something's down, you can do show run and really look at these ports and see what's configured on them. So if one's got shutdown, well, the port's shut down, so it's not going to communicate no matter how well it's configured without it, the port being up. And if we do show interface, or IP rather, interface brief, you're going to see that we got a up, and then we got an administratively down, and then a down. And we'll explain both of those because they're going to be needed for troubleshooting. So you'll understand how the protocol versus status and the difference is between it. All you need to know is status is layer 1. Protocol is referenced as layer 2 in the OSI model, which you have already talked about. So that is that right there is GNS3. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down GNS3, and we're going to take a look. And what I'm going to do actually is, before I even get into this, I'm going to pull up Putty. And I can't make it a big screen, but Putty is very simple. So all I'm going to do is in Putty, I got it open. I'm going to put serial. I know my serial connection's to COM3. You know what? Let's go ahead and show. I'm going to go ahead and use up the other camera. All right, so here, and I'm going to show you guys the screen kind of. All right, what we're looking at is I've got a USB, which is this right here. And if you come all the way down, it's going to follow. It comes all the way down. It converts right here. And this thing runs all the way up to my switch. As you can see, it goes up into there. And it looks like an Ethernet on the end, but it's not cabled the same. So if we look here, this right here is Putty. And I have serial connection here. And in here, I know that my port is COM3. But before we can determine what is COM3 and what isn't, if you have the USB, you have to look. Sometimes it'll show you when it plugs up, but if you're not sure, go to your device manager and figure out from there. As I'll talk more about when we booting up the labs, how to operate these, I'll probably make a video on how these operate, so that way you can connect to your equipment. But for now, just be familiar, because this ain't at the point of the labs in the videos. I'm just showing you the iOS. Like I said, if you figure a way to get in, that's fine, but we will be talking very soon about how to set up. So if you don't know how to set up, or you've seen a few things and you're not sure, them videos are coming. So alright, for serial line COM3, I'm going to open up a session here, and we're going to put it back over to this, and I'm actually going to open up. Do I have my other? There we go. Over here, because I want you guys to see. So I'm going to put this down, or at least take the earbuds out. I don't need them really anyways. To be honest, I've just gotten so used to using them. Move them up to here. So you're going to see me walk over this right here. You can see my hand here, so it's right beside here. So alright, this is the end of the jack, and it looks just like Ethernet, guys. Like the only way, if you look at the cable, and we'll talk more about that, that's coming very soon too. Cabling, that's where a lot of people I don't see in videos talk about the cabling. And I don't know if you have to know it, but alright, we're going to look over here. There is a console port, and I'm going to see if I can reach it with the camera. I'm going to see if, yeah, we can get there easy peasy. If we look over here, I can't get it quite close enough, but over here, they're labeled as console ports. We also got a mini USB console port. And you can see this is a, if I can get it there, if you zoom that in, that is a 2960-S PoE there. Now once I get into there, I should on this screen be able to hit enter, and hopefully we get some connection. And so far I'm not. Oh, oops. Actually, I ran into the wrong one. That is not the one live. I got caught up showing you guys. That's the live one. Alright, so up here on the screen, you can see I'm in a 2960-2, because I have two. I'm able to identify them. I changed that name. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm not doing anything over there on this camera at all anymore. So we're going to turn it off, because it's all right here now. So this is an actual physical switch. And now you can see here, look, I'm in what I call, and let's see, what commands do we got? If we do enable, turn on privileged commands. So we can go ahead and go into enabled mode, as there's a few more. We got the show commands. As you see, the commands are very, very limited in this. They're very, very limited. So I'm very limited to what I can do. And it's mostly I can do, you know, trace route, so on from there. I can do small stuff. I can even telnet, but you're going to have to know the password to telnet to something. But once I do enable mode, which on this one I have a password, look at the difference here. Look at the difference. You can see the whole difference of the amount that I'm given command lines. So you need to understand that each command line or access is going to allow more commands. As I get to config T, I'm going to have even more commands, as that is the configuration mode. And look at the commands. That's a lot of commands. And this is a 2960 switch from Cisco. I'm going to end. See, on this one, I really like... I made a mistake. I should have did exit probably. So this is going to take a minute. So the only difference... There we go. See, if I go to exit, when I first come up, guess what mode I'm going to be in? I'm going to be in user mode. Alright, so what I want to do is... I'm going to remove the password so I can show y'all this better. No secret. No password, maybe? No password. Is it login? No. That's for user exec. No enable secret. How about that? There we go. So now you're going to see when I exit and I go from user mode, all of a sudden I don't have a password. But the reason I did this is I want to show you guys that when you first plug into a switch, you're in user mode, and I go to privilege exec mode or privileged mode, and then config T is the mode. You will need to know these three modes for the CCENT. So you see the difference here. It's all based on right in after the name of it. And here it's in parentheses configure. And exit. Now, I want to show you guys how a switch reloads. And now I put the word reload and notice what happens. I'm in user mode, and I'm actually going to turn off that probably look up here shortly. What is it? No IP. No, but ain't DHCP. It's going to be config T then. No. That's it, IP. IP. Domain lookup. There we go. No IP. Domain lookup. Look up. And that should hopefully do away with that. I hope. Usually it does. Yep, there we go. Alright, so no more quick. So I'm doing that just for reference. Alright, so exit. And once again, we start off in user mode, privilege mode, and then comp T mode. I'm going to end. We want to reload a switch. It's going to restart it. We haven't really modded. Well, you know what? We did remodify it. It's going to bring back our password. But what I want to show you here is that it's after it reloads, I kind of want you to get an idea of how it looks when one's reloading while plugged into the console port. Boot it up. Now, would you reload a switch? Usually you're not. If you're network live environment, you're usually not going to reload your switch for any particular reason. But if you're booting one up or you're configuring a switch to get ready maybe to upgrade or implement a switch, then you would, you know, this wouldn't look as foreign to you. A lot of times most jobs are going to be in, they're already going to have switches and etc. there. Or maybe you run into one that there's a password on it. The guy, maybe he got fired or something and you can't get to it. And there's an issue. Well, at least you can see, you know, some of the configuration and take it as needed. As we see now booting up, we got a MAC address. Initializing the flash, as you can see. So we're running through. It's a little bit different, as you can see, than the router. It's going through its post. There's the flash. Look at the image we're using. 2960 is the newest image. Universal K9, which is a new image from Cisco. It's kind of a way that they're going now. And we will talk about the different images before we get into the router portion, which will probably be a video after the subnetting and etc. So this one also compresses the image here. It says loading, but it's also basically like decompressing an image. So we're waiting for it to boot up. And as you can see, the image always starts with the device, the C 2960S. Layer 2 switch, by the way. You will figure out that there's a layer 2 and a layer 3 switches. There we go again, version number, etc. Some more information. And we should be coming up pretty soon to it being complete. Done initializing flash. And you can actually hear the switch maybe through my mic. And you can tell it's checking stuff. In status, status passed, begins, in status, status passed. Extracting front end and front end U code info. I think that takes it a minute. And then I will give you something that you will need to memorize, as it could be a question on the CCENT or the CCNA if they decide to throw it on the ICND2. So I will talk about it. It's one of the most, it's probably the first command that you really want to memorize, and they're going to ask you for it properly in full force if they do. It could be in a question. Yeah, it'd probably be in a question form if they do. Most of the interface stuff is troubleshooting networks with multiple questions. And there would be no reason to really save the configuration unless it told you to in some kind of scenario. So waiting for this to boot up. Like I said, I just wanted you guys to see how Switch boots up. If we look over here at my other camera, you can see that there is some lights on. All the lights are on, so it ain't very all the way completed those. Once it goes complete, it actually will not be lit up like that anymore, and we'll leave that on because I'm going to show you once it comes up. This is the switch that we're actually in right here. That's the other one, the one I accidentally plugged into. Remember, all these silver ones on my lab is layer 3 switches. So now it's going through a stack election. We'll talk about that later on. The switch does have stacking enabled on the bottom. Look at the, we just seen some orange, you just missed it. Now look, the LEDs went down to 2. So that means our switch is finished through the post test, and now it's completing and finishing to where we can configure it. So we're going to go ahead and turn that off. Ain't nothing else going to really happen light-wise there. So as we see our switch model right here. WS-C, C's for Catalyst 2960S-48. 48 tells us the ports. PS, I know, is for Power over Ethernet. This is the version of iOS, and this is the iOS image that we're using. SW is going to be switch. And as you can see, it also tells us that we're plugged into the console port via RJ45. There is a USB mode in here. And as we see, look, I'm on user mode. Now remember, we got rid of the password a minute ago, and we just restarted the router. Same as turning it off, turning it back on. Now watch what happens when I hit enable. My password has came back. And this leads me to tell you how to, one of the commands. So if I wanted to, and we're not going to do the reload for the sake of time, but if I wanted to go back and it didn't work, no enable secret, we'll talk about these commands later on. That takes my password out. If I go there, exit, enter, and all of a sudden now I don't require a password for any of the modes. What I would do at the privilege exec mode is you would save. Now remember, let's do show startup config. Let's see if it tells me. Alright, look at this. Now this is encrypted, but I have an enable secret password here. And this is the startup. This is what it starts up with. So if I shut down my switch right now, turn it back on, it's going to come back up with this password. Secret means encrypted password, and or if you do an enable password, it's going to be an unencrypted by text password. For the sake of it, guys, my password's only Strifix. So we've got a lot of interfaces, as you can see here. It's just going to show if any of them's configured as we got one configured with an IP address, and that's our trunk port, I believe is what I got this set up as from another video, or set up from when I was using it lab-wise related. But if I do a show run, remember we got a shows a secret. Now to show run, we don't see anything saying a secret here. We don't see anything showing a secret here. We got some in crypto, but this is normal. I need to probably take that stuff out. We got spanning tree. But I see nothing says a secret, and it would have by now. Now this should all look familiar. It matches the startup config. But now what happens when I go back? Let's say I put one. As you can see, the line console here but that's the same. That's for me to telnet in. But if I go back in, let's say I'm in enable mode, I go to config T, enable secret, strifix, and show run. So we're going to do the show running configuration. Let's see now if it shows a password. Look at there. Now we've got it showing a password in the running config. So that I just want you to see, and this is going to be what I'm going to go back on there. No, enable secret and end show run. So we know exactly where it is, but notice it's not there. But my show startup shows one. So what I want you to understand, and this is something that you will have to know, is that your running configuration is not automatically saved. To save it, you need to do, we're only going to do the ones that ask on Cisco. There is a quicker command for this, but for the sake of it being a certification, we're going to do exactly what they would want you to do, or what they're looking for. So what I would do is a copy startup, or running, sorry, copy running config, startup config. Hit enter. It's going to ask me the destination file name. I'm going to hit enter again. Oh, sorry guys. Hit enter again. Building configuration. And now let's show startup. Let's see now if the startup config shows the password. Notice no password anymore in the startup config. It is successfully saved. So that will be a command that you do need to know. So if you want to write that down, remember in privilege, if we look, let's go back to exit. I'm going to go into privilege mode. Remember, enable gets me to privilege mode, and I'm going to do a copy running config to startup config, and then hit enter. And it's going to ask for the destination file name. Hit enter again, and it's going to save it. Now, here's what you must know. You're starting, so I will tell you right now, memorize this command right here. And don't forget it. There can be a trick question saying what will happen if the router boots up, and they show you configurations that you added in. And they're going to do like reload. If they haven't did copy from running config to startup config, your answer will be anything that they configured will not be in there at all. Once it restarts, it's back to the way before it was configured. So no configurations are held. That could be a quick question to make you overthink from one simple command missing in an exam. Now, must understand a startup config. If I restart the router, let's say I have a running config and I've been making configuration changes, but something went wrong and I'm having a heck of a time, and if I restart or I reload the router without saving it, it will go back to my startup config as you've seen. So remember, anything that you've messed up, as long as you haven't saved it, you can go back to where your last, or where your startup config was when you first turned it back on, or what it was at, or whatever is saved in the startup config. So don't forget, in environments, in a real life environment, most of the time you're not going to be reloading your switches or your routers. Remember to save any configuration changes that you made to your startup configuration or config. If you do not, and a power outage happens or your switch restarts, it could be a world of trouble because you're going back to where you did not save, and you're going to be troubleshooting, trying to remember maybe what you changed and so on from there. So always change. Every time you make a change, it is good practice on switches and routers to do copy run config space startup config, just like you see here there. For this course, you will want to know that word for word, running config, startup config. For the sake of this, if you're only worried about what they want in the certification, this part is not nothing to do with it. But if you wanted a quick way to run config to startup config, WR does the same thing. But they will not ask, that will not be on the exam. It will be, how do you save a configuration or configuration changes that you made. They want you to know copy running -config space startup -config. This command here. But when you become an engineer, you're probably going to use that because, well, it's just quicker. So what is WR? It means write. I can put it where to write, or I can just click write. And if you do the default of write, it's going to write your running config to your startup config. But it is better practice for the exam and on your labs to type this all the way out. Running config, startup config. And also remember, in these configurations, let's say I do something. Let's say, oh, remember he said show IP, but I can't remember what the rest was. We'll do a question mark. Oh, there he is. That's right, interfaces. You can do this also on the simulation in the exam also. Show interface, and then let's say I'm not sure how to spell brief. Bam, brief. Even though I hope you guys can understand how to spell brief. But let's say I do show IP, and I might not be very quick at spelling interface, and then I can do that and BR brief. So I can basically do something like this. Well, there's many of them for interface, BR, show IP interface brief. Now I'm going to tell you this: when you do your labs, when you learn to do your labs, I would rather you use tabs, honestly, than something like this. Now in the real world, you probably would cut it short instead of something like this. This means, if we look here, this is show IP interface brief, but it's cut down. If you do not remember what each term stands for, and you get a written question, you might find yourself debating it because maybe one of them is very close. So do the tab. For the sake of learning, do the tab, guys. Do the tab. So we would do like a show IP int tab, BR tab, and then that way you'll memorize the command. Show IP interface brief. I recommend typing it all the way out, then tab, but tab's better than doing that above, and typing it all the way out is better than doing tab because you're going to memorize the command. Now there's going to be a point that you're going to do so many commands that it's going to be tough to memorize. But just memorize the wording of the command. If you're doing tab, let's say you know it's interface, but you're doing tab to do it quicker, that's fine. But make sure that you understand what you're doing. So alright guys, that does it today. As we can see over here, I've changed nothing on this. We have looked at a physical switch today, and we have looked at a router in GNS3 image. And for this lesson, you have got familiar with what the IOS looks like in a router and switch. Get used to it. They call it CLI for short. It's command line interface. You could plug in via console port into a switch or router. That's the method that you probably need to get used to. You can use Telnet, but it must be set up, or SSH or SHH. But you must be familiar with it. But you will be mostly doing it through a console port. Is the easiest way. So if you got a home lab or there, get ready. If you have not made those purchases or you haven't downloaded GNS3, this video is the time you need to start doing it. We're fixing to be moving towards getting into these a lot more. All we've got to do is cover subnetting and a few other things, and we will be hitting nothing but looking at interfaces in the videos. And I would like for you guys to not only write it down, but get used to it. And I will be talking about labs, and we'll be going through a little bit of troubleshooting to help strengthen y'all's ability in memorizing some of the commands. So until next time, guys, I hope this video has been beneficial. If you've enjoyed it, or if it's helped you in any way or form or fashion, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Until next time, guys, see you in the next video. Peace.